In a galaxy fraught with tension, Jedi Master Qui-Gon Jinn is no stranger to the whispers of the Force, but the disturbance he senses is unlike any he's felt before. As a master of the Force and a maverick within the Jedi Order, Qui-Gon has always questioned the rigid rules that govern his kind. But nothing has prepared him for the discovery of two brothers, Anakin and Revan Skywalker, whose destinies intertwine with the very fabric of the Force. Revan, a self-taught Force user hardened by years of slavery, carries with him a power that threatens to reshape the future of the Jedi and Sith alike. His cynical yet protective nature stands in stark contrast to his younger brother, Anakin, whose innocence shines through amidst the darkness of their shared past. As Qui-Gon navigates the labyrinth of Tatooine's lawless underbelly, the bonds between these siblings grow, revealing truths about their past and dreams of a future far greater than they could imagine. With Padme, the Queen's handmaiden, caught between duty and an unexpected connection to Revan, the stage is set for a new prophecy to emerge in the Jedi never foresaw. With tension building in the Force and the fate of the galaxy at stake, Qui-Gon must decide whether to follow the Jedi Code or the call of destiny that beckons him toward Revan. Qui-Gon Jinn, a Jedi Master, and his Padawan Obi-Wan Kenobi were barely escaping the deadly grip of the Trade Federation's blockade on Naboo when they found themselves stranded on the desert planet of Tatooine. The Federation had threatened to destroy the peaceful people of Naboo unless the Queen surrendered her throne, but two Jedi were more than they bargained for. After surviving an intense battle, including a direct hit to their ship's hyperdrive, Qui-Gon and his team, including the quirky Gungan Jar Jar Binks, found themselves stuck on Tatooine. With a damaged ship and the Federation hot on their tail, they had no choice but to make the best of the situation. But fate had something else in store. Qui-Gon felt the pull of the Force guiding him to a pair of brothers, slaves under the ruthless Watto. One of them, a gifted young boy named Anakin, was already a beacon of potential. But it was his older brother, Revan, a self-taught Force user, whose raw power and untapped legacy caught Qui-Gon's attention. As tensions escalated, a prophecy began to stir, one that could change the course of the galaxy. The Jedi Master now faced a decision. The path of duty or the deeper, more mysterious calling of the Force. Under the blazing suns of a desert world, a trio marched toward the nearest settlement, chasing the hope of a cheap hyperdrive and a way off the planet. Their mission was simple: get the Queen to safety and warn the Council of rising danger. But a sudden voice from behind shattered their focus. A winded guard arrived, dragging with him a sharp-eyed girl in dusty clothes. Orders from above, she was to join the group. The Jedi Master frowned, his patience fraying in the heat. "No more commands today," he snapped, but the reply cut deeper. "The Queen wishes it. The mission just got a whole lot more complicated." Panaka interrupted with a glare, his voice sharp as he responded to the Jedi's refusal of the Queen's wishes. "She insists on learning about this planet and its people." Padme stepped forward, standing directly before the aging Jedi Master. "I've been trained in self-defense by the best the Queen could provide, and I speak multiple languages, which could be crucial for our mission, Master." Qui-Gon hesitated, wanting to refuse both the captain and Padme, fearing the dangers of the settlement would only escalate with a young girl involved. His mind raced with dark thoughts. What could happen to her in such a lawless place? Yet something stopped him. It wasn't just the strength in her eyes, though that intrigued him. No, it was the unmistakable Force presence that flowed through her, powerful despite her apparent lack of training. How had someone like Padme remained undiscovered by the Jedi, especially given her life in Republic space? The Jedi could sense that something was off. Despite the galaxy's political webs, they had most certainly encountered her, but no one dared anger her family. The truth was clear to him. The handmaiden standing before him wasn't just any servant, it was the real Queen Amidala, the one who hid behind her decoy. She could blend in with her handmaidens to evade assassins, but she couldn't hide from the Forcenaut without proper training. Panaka, nearly pleading, urged the Jedi Master to go with the Queen's request, a request that Qui-Gon, despite his reservations, couldn't refuse. "This is a bad idea," he muttered, but he knew the stakes were too high to argue. "You can come," he finally said, his disapproval clear. As they journeyed to Mos Espa, Qui-Gon felt a strange tremor in the Force feint, vanishing as soon as he tried to focus on it, leaving him frowning. Something was out there, but it remained just beyond his grasp. As the group made their way into the heart of Mos Espa, Qui-Gon couldn't help but warn Padme of the dangers lurking in the shadows. Tatooine, a harsh and unforgiving world, was under the control of a ruthless crime syndicate led by Jabba the Hutt. Qui-Gon shared his knowledge with Padme, emphasizing that a young girl like her would fetch a high price in the black market, especially if her royal identity was discovered. "This isn't the Republic," he told her sharply, cutting off her naive thoughts. "This is Jabba's world, and everyone here knows it." As they walked through the crowded streets, Qui-Gon reflected on his past visit to this lawless planet. Slavery still existed here, a grim reality that filled Padme with disbelief. Qui-Gon's words were firm. Tatooine belongs to the Hutt Syndicate, not the Jawas or the Tusken Raiders. The world was harsh, controlled by those who dealt in the darkest of trades, and Qui-Gon knew all too well that survival in such a place meant submitting to the will of Jabba and his ilk. "Why isn't the Jedi doing something about it? Aren't you supposed to keep the peace?" she whispered to the Jedi Master. "If you know what's happening to these people day in and day out, why hasn't anything been done to help them?" The Jedi Master sighed, replying, "As you said, we're peacekeepers, not soldiers, and the Republic can hardly defend its own borders. We simply don't have the resources to fight against all the criminal organizations in the Outer Rim." He quickly changed the subject, suggesting they try one of the smaller dealerships, hoping for less attention. Qui-Gon's wisdom settled in as he mentioned less attention that way, receiving a small nod from her, though her eyes told him the conversation was far from over. As they entered a small shop, they were greeted by a pudgy creature that flew into their faces, sending Padme scrambling to cover her nose against the creature's foul stench. "Why isn't the Jedi doing something about it? Aren't you supposed to keep the peace?" she whispered to the Jedi Master. "If you know what's happening to these people day in and day out, why hasn't anything been done to help them?" The Jedi Master sighed, replying, "As you said, we're peacekeepers, not soldiers, and the Republic can hardly defend its own borders. We simply don't have the resources to fight against all the criminal organizations in the Outer Rim." He quickly changed the subject, suggesting they try one of the smaller dealerships, hoping for less attention. Qui-Gon's wisdom settled in as he mentioned less attention that way, receiving a small nod from her, though her eyes told him the conversation was far from over. As they entered a small shop, they were greeted by a pudgy creature that flew into their faces, sending Padme scrambling to cover her nose against the creature's foul stench. "Hi, Chubba-Danaga," the blue creature snapped, eyes narrowing as he demanded to know why they had entered his store. The foul stench that accompanied his words made Padme gag. "I need parts for a J-Type 3, 27 Nubian," Qui-Gon answered, remaining composed despite the less-than welcoming greeting from the pudgy Toydarian. At that, the creature's attitude shifted instantly, his snout curling into a toothy grin, producing an odd, smacking noise. "Nubian, you say?" "Yes, we have lots of spare parts for that." His eyes swept over the group, finally landing on the lone Gungan. "What's this?" he asked, his tone tinged with curiosity. "Vit lai le twai noi dung sao bang ting mod kak hup dern, fong kak ton jiao bian, gay ta ma. Kothin bing learn zai thick valin hair kak sir kiern thirte, ko te trick dern tem kak ko fu her nu trong king tang, ngui noi ting de zai thick chovan day. Harn she kak tu, kum tu vi farm ching sak YouTube. Lord ba kak ten ring, chi tit kom fu her vi kick ban guk. Chi du nyat one lur charn kit qua to chat GPT. Trala kit qua trong one dwarn vun du nyat. Kung swung dong, kung gait do dong. Abilities such as flight or invisibility, they might also cast love spells. Or my personal favorite, help the magician find buried treasure. And mark my words, one of these days I'll make a video on treasure hunting with demons. That being said, the question of what specific powers the 12 kings and dukes of hell have to offer. The magician leads us to the third book of the Grimoire, and arguably the most convoluted book of them all. As you can see, this final section of the book contains a vast number of cryptic letter puzzles, better known as magic squares. These magic squares are talismans, meaning that each one has been imbued with sacred magic. The puzzles themselves must be solved in order to activate the magic, which we now understand is largely powered by demons. They also must be solved only after the magician successfully completes the A. Bremelin operation. Otherwise, they simply won't work the demonic powers a magician can take advantage of are clearly listed, and each one is specific to its own magic square. As expected, there's a lot of standard spells, such as those to heal illnesses, tell the future, read minds, acquire vast, viet lai le twai noi dung sao bang ting aing mod kek hup dern, fong kek ton jiao bi un, gay ta ma, Kothem bing learn, zai thick, valin hair kek sir kiern thirte. Có thể trick đơn thêm các câu phù hợp như trong kinh thành người nổi tiếng để giải thích cho vấn đề. Har chế các tu, cùng de vi phạm chính xác YouTube. Lar ba các tên ring, chi tiết không phù hợp với kit banga. Chi du nhất one lur charn kit qua tu chat GPT. Tra lại kit qua trong one đoán văn du nhất. Kong swung dong, Kong gauge do dong. Abram land operation, which he gives us 6 months. All other Bremlin manuscripts specify 18 months, and there are more details added that make these 18 months even more complex if the operation wasn't already challenging enough. The second problem is that his Abramon oil recipe was incorrect. The German manuscripts, which are the oldest and most authoritative present, a recipe almost identical to the one described in the Bible for holy anointing oil. Mather's version replaces the herb calamus with glandul and forgets he spiced cassia entirely. The third problem is that the German manuscripts have 251 magic squares, and Mather's version only has 242. Worse yet, 2/3 of Mather squares are not completely filled in, and many of those that are filled in are painfully incorrect with words that are misspelled and out of order, and in such disagreement with the other existing manuscripts that it really makes you wonder if the French translator needed a new pair of glasses. The fourth problem, and perhaps the most significant, is that Mather's version is missing an entire book. This missing book is meant to be book number 2 following right after the narrative of book 1, so what this additional Revan Skywalker, dressed in sleeveless black robes, stood with his muscular arms exposed, wrapped in white cloths, looking serious, while his younger brother, Anakin, wore a carefree expression. The Toydarian, Watto, snapped at them, especially Revan, demanding to know why they were late. Revan coolly responded, explaining that Anakin had helped him salvage an engine from an old swoop bike, warning Watto that it could affect his profit. Watto's anger grew, but Revan wasn't intimidated. "You're lucky you're good at your job," Watto snarled, irritated by the disrespect. Revan and Anakin exchanged glaring looks, and though Watto tried to maintain control, the tension between them was undeniable. "Just watch the store until I get back," Watto ordered, though the defiance from the brothers lingered in the air. Anakin quickly responded, "Of course," before the older boy Revan could speak up, realizing they'd both regret their words. Watto nodded toward Anakin, his eyes cold, as he left with Qui-Gon trailing behind. "Sleemo," the older boy muttered, his anger clear as he spat in Huttese. He only relaxed when he noticed Anakin looking at him with concern. "Don't anger Watto, Rev," Anakin warned, his voice filled with worry. Revan exhaled deeply. "I won't let that slob get the upper hand on you," he retorted. "We're the reason he even has a business." He walked toward the work counter, his fingers tracing the exposed wires of an old engine as the tension between them hung in the air. "Is this conversation helpful so far?" "Man, the counter, Ani. I'll see if I can get this old girl working." The young man called out to his brother, who promptly jumped up and kept an eye on a pretty girl who wandered around the shop. The girl hummed softly to herself, casually browsing, though she didn't expect to find anything she needed. She figured, though, the people around here would be willing to pay a fortune for it or maybe even kill for it if what she'd heard was true. While she took a glance at the selection, a strange sensation prickled up her spine, causing her to shiver. Looking over her shoulder, she caught the blonde-haired boy quickly looking away, pretending he hadn't been staring. But she knew better. From the corner of her eye, she saw him glance back at her. The other boy nearby chuckled quietly. The one closer to her age seemed absorbed in his work on an engine. She turned back to her browsing, passing time as she waited for her companion to return from his errand. "Are you an angel?" the boy asked suddenly. She heard a soft voice and turned to find a blonde-haired boy staring at her. "Pardon?" she asked, confused, unsure if she had heard him right. "An angel?" he replied, his eyes sparkling with wonder. "I heard the pilots in the cantina talk about them. They live on the moons of Ego, I think. They're said to be good, kind, so beautiful they make even the toughest pirates cry like children." He explained, only to be met with a puzzled stare. "I've never heard of angels before," she admitted, still trying to piece it all together. Padme confided in the blonde boy, "You must be one, but you don't even know it." Anakin, with a shy smile, responded, unknowingly earning a sly smirk from the raven-haired teen. His brother had quite the charm with the ladies. "You're funny. How do you know all this?" Padme asked, her laugh making Anakin's heart skip a beat. "I listen to traders and star pilots at the bar. I'm a pilot, you know. One day I'll fly my mom, my brother, and myself away from here, away from Watto and Jabba. We'll find a new place to live," he declared. "You're a pilot?" Padme raised a brow, clearly skeptical. Deep down, she wondered if he could even see past the dashboard. Revan Skywalker was grinning, full of pride as he casually dropped, "All my life." His voice carried the weight of someone who'd been there forever. Padme, puzzled, asked, "How long have you been here?" His response was a grunt, followed by a cryptic, "Since I was very little, don't really remember how old." 3. He then spoke again, this time revealing something deeper. "Yeah, but I was too young to remember. But I know that my mom and Rev belonged to Gardulla the Hutt until she lost us to Watto in a bet." Padme's eyes widened in disbelief. "You're a slave?" she asked, the words heavy in her mouth. The innocence of a child like Anakin being tied to such a life was almost too much to bear. A shadow crossed over the young boy's face. It wasn't just the word, but the way it was spoken, making him feel humiliated and dirty. "I'm a person, and my name is Revan," he said with defiance. "Take it easy, Ani." "She's not from here, so she doesn't know better," the raven-haired boy said, stepping up to his brother and placing a hand on his shoulder, the gesture that only he could do to calm him down. "Sorry about that. Little Ani doesn't like being called a slave, and I'd appreciate it if you'd refrain from doing so." He asked her kindly, but there was a hint of sharpness in his voice. It wasn't until she stood face to face with him that she noticed how striking his eyes were so unique. "Don't call me Little Annie, Rev," Anakin grumbled at his brother, getting a teasing smirk in response. "Well, Mom has always called you her little warrior," Revan teased, causing Anakin to blush as the true meaning of his name was revealed in front of the girl. With a nudge, Anakin pushed him for spilling the secret. "I'm just messing with you," Revan chuckled, enjoying his brother's flustered reaction. But then he paused, realizing he hadn't introduced himself. "Oh right, sorry, I'm Revan Skywalker. Meet my little brother," Revan said, a hint of amusement in his voice. Anakin, with a pout, muttered, "You're only a few years older, Revan." The two brothers, though sharing an unspoken bond, were both shaped by their harsh life under Watto's rule. Despite their difficult circumstances, Anakin couldn't imagine life without his older brother. Together, they made it through. Though they'd never known their fathers, their mother had always told them they didn't have one, and they assumed she'd separated from them before their births. It used to sadden Anakin knowing Revan was only his half-brother, but in the end, it didn't matter. They had each other, and that was everything. As their conversation was interrupted by Jar Jar's clumsiness with a small droid, Revan, eager to avoid Watto's wrath, did something Anakin had rarely seen. He reached out with his hand, pulling the droid into the air before deactivating it with a precise smack. The scene was a mix of chaos and power, a reminder of the brothers' unique connection to the Force. Revan grabbed the droid, preparing to tidy up the mess caused by their chaotic chase. "He's right, you know," Revan remarked to Padme, who was still processing his actions. "About what?" she asked, genuinely curious. "You could be an angel," Revan replied with a sly smile before turning to help Anakin. The comment made Padme's heart flutter. She wasn't sure why, but there was something about Revan's words that felt different from a child calling her an angel. It made her smile, cheeks flushing slightly. Meanwhile, Qui-Gon, growing increasingly frustrated with the mess of the past days, thought about their failed negotiations, battling droids, dealing with a demanding queen, and now finding themselves on Tatooine hunting for a crucial part for their ship. The Force had led them to this far from ideal situation, but Qui-Gon couldn't shake the feeling that something or some important was drawing them toward a destiny no one had expected. A long search guided by the Force brings him to the dusty edge of the galaxy, where two boys hidden in plain sight pulse with untrained power. He knows the rules, their age breaks them, but rules mean little when destiny knocks. The traitor scoffs at his offer, eyes gleaming with greed. Republic credits? Worthless out here. The Jedi's voice stays calm. His hand moves with quiet resolve. The Force answers, but the stubborn merchant doesn't flinch. Time is slipping. Hope is fragile. And the brothers, bound in chains yet brimming with light, may be the spark that reignites a prophecy lost. Qui-Gon raised his hand, using the Force to try to sway Watto's stubbornness. "Credits will do fine," he said again, his voice steady. But Watto wasn't having it. "No, they won't," he snapped back, eyes flashing with frustration. Qui-Gon repeated his words, his hand sweeping through the air, a calm but forceful gesture. "Credits will do fine," he stated once more. Watto, however, was unmoved, his anger rising as he retorted, "What do you think you're doing waving your hand around like that?" The Jedi's attempt at diplomacy faltered as Watto remained defiant, proving once again that not all negotiations could be won with words alone. "Do you like this personality?" Qui-Gon Jinn stood there, frustration rising as Watto jabbed a thin, bony finger at his chest. "What? You think you're some Jedi? Ha! I'm a Toydarian. Mind tricks don't work on me, only money. No money, no parts, no deal." His voice echoed in the harsh Tatooine heat. Qui-Gon, trying to calm his inner storm, turned and walked away, heading back towards the shop, where he saw the two boys tidying up a mess, clearly caused by none other than Jar Jar. Qui-Gon couldn't help but sense it. There was something deeper at play here, something in the Force, especially with the Skywalkers. Revan, the older brother, was a mystery and a danger to the Jedi in ways they hadn't anticipated. As the dust of Mos Espa settled around him, the true gravity of his choices loomed closer, and he knew that Revan's destiny was bound to reshape everything. The group was leaving. "We're going," Qui-Gon commanded, striding toward the door with R2-D, 2 bleeping behind him and Jar Jar stumbling after, knocking over a few objects. Padme felt an odd heaviness as she realized they were leaving too soon. She couldn't explain it, but something about Revan made her feel like he was a long-lost friend. "I'm glad to have met you, Revan." She smiled warmly, her cheeks flushing as she remembered Anakin was still in the room. "And you too, Anakin." Revan gave a big smile, his eyes gleaming with a strange mix of fondness and mystery. "I'm glad I met you both. I hope our paths cross again one day." He waved and Padme returned the gesture with a soft smile. "Is this conversation helpful so far?" Revan simply nodded, his gaze indifferent as Padme flashed him a smile before hurrying off to join the others. "She was nice." Anakin sighed, watching her go with a dreamy expression. "I guess," Revan replied with a shrug, his cynicism clear. Unlike his younger brother, he saw no reason to get Adashi, especially to people they'd likely never see again. "You seem to like her a lot. Should I tell Mum we're about to gain a daughter-in-law?" Revan teased, causing Anakin to flush red and shove him playfully. Just then, Watto flew over, landing on the counter with a huff. "Outlanders! They think just because we live out here away from everything that we know nothing." Revan fought the urge to make a biting remark. He knew better than to make things worse for them, especially when their lives were quite literally in his hands. The power to detonate their bombs lay with him, though he had no intention of testing that limit unless absolutely forced to. After leaving the shop, Qui-Gon was in a bad mood. Watto had been right. As much as he hated to admit it, no one had the T-14 hyperdrive generator, and they wouldn't accept Republic currency either. He should have realized that sooner. To make matters worse, their ship didn't have anything of value to trade. But what really bothered him were the two boys from the shop. The Force was guiding him toward them, particularly the older one. But it was impossible to ignore how strong the younger boy's presence in the Force was too. One of them shined brighter, though Qui-Gon couldn't figure out which. His thoughts were interrupted when Padme nudged him to get his attention, pulling his gaze down to her. "Yes, can I help you?" the Jedi Master inquired, his voice calm yet curious as the young handmaiden Padme glanced around, ensuring they were alone. "Your Jedi powers. You can lift things telekinetically, right?" she whispered, her words barely a breath. A raised brow from Qui-Gon followed this was an unusual question. "It's one of our most basic abilities," he responded, his tone measured. "What brought this up?" he asked, his curiosity piqued. Padme leaned in, sharing with Qui-Gon the two boys, Anakin and Revan Skywalker. Qui-Gon's mind raced, the name Revan echoing in his thoughts. He had heard it before, but it didn't quite fit into place. It didn't matter, not yet. Padme continued, describing how Jar Jar had accidentally activated a droid, which ran amok until Revan, with a mere gesture, brought it to a halt. Qui-Gon paused, sensing something more to this boy. Self-trained, he mused? Or perhaps his parent? Someone connected to the Jedi Order? But Skywalker? I've never come across a Jedi by that name. His curiosity piqued. Qui-Gon knew he had to investigate further. Something ancient stirred in the Force, and this encounter was no coincidence. Do you like this personality? Qui-Gon Jinn couldn't shake the nagging thought that a Force-sensitive individual, especially one on the brink of falling to the dark side, was too dangerous to be left unchecked. His mind wandered back to his greatest failure at Xanatos. But just as his thoughts deepened, his attention was grabbed by the chaos unfolding before him. Jar Jar Binks, as usual, had managed to anger a menacing Doug, and the Gungan was now running for his life. Qui-Gon readied himself to step in, but then he noticed the two boys from the market, Revan and Anakin, appear to rescue him. Chesko, Sebulba, the blonde-haired boy, warned the Doug, while the raven-haired teen said something that instantly seemed to provoke the Doug further, his anger written all over his face. "What are they saying?" Padme asked quietly, confused by the language and the tension mounting around them. Qui-Gon, with a hint of humor, warned that crossing paths with Sebulba and harming Jar Jar would lead to serious consequences. After all, Jar Jar was tied to the Republic Senate. His words made the handmaidens smile at their cleverness. Once the danger passed, Anakin, with his usual brightness, joined the group, greeting them warmly. While Anakin thrived in meeting new people, his older brother Revan preferred solitude, his quiet nature, a contrast to Anakin's cheer. Anakin, though, couldn't quite explain the exhaustion he felt after long hours away from home. Revan and Anakin shared how close the Gungan came to becoming Doug food and suggested showing the group around their home Mos Eisley. With a few areas to avoid, especially with Jar Jar around, the group agreed to follow them through the streets, discovering the hidden corners of their life on Tatooine. Qui-Gon decided to follow the Skywalker brothers through the dusty streets of the town, knowing this would keep the Gungan out of trouble for the time being. His mind was focused, sensing the pull of the Force towards both boys. He stayed silent, observing them closely, gauging which of them he might take with him to Coruscant to train as a Jedi. Obi-Wan was already ready for the trials, but Qui-Gon felt a strong connection to one of these siblings, who could hold the key to an even greater destiny. The moment was tense, with unspoken thoughts and shifting fates.